The Atlantic is rewriting the map of America. Along North Carolina's Outer Banks, the village of Buxton, famous for fishing piers' sandy escapes, and generations of coastal living, is now fighting for survival. And shockingly, this crisis isn't from a hurricane making landfall. It's from hundreds of miles offshore. Hurricane Melissa, a powerhouse churning the Caribbean with winds over 160 miles/hour, has sent towering surf and a relentless storm surge into our coastline. On October 28th, 5 oceanfront homes in Buxton collapsed straight into the Atlantic, torn apart by pounding waves. In total, 27 homes have fallen into the ocean since 2020, and that number keeps climbing with every offshore storm. Highway NC-12, the only lifeline for many coastal residents, is once again blocked by ocean overwash. Communities are temporarily cut off, beaches are closed, and the question grows louder. How long can the Outer Banks hold on? Tuesday morning began like any other along the Outer Banks until the ocean decided to take back the land. Offshore winds fueled by Hurricane Melissa pushed wave after wave into the fragile coastline. And in just a few hours, 5 oceanfront homes in Buxton collapsed into the Atlantic. Witnesses recorded the terrifying sequence: foundations crumbling, porches tilting, whole houses sliding forward before vanishing into violent surf. By noon, debris, wooden beams, appliances, children's toys was scattered miles down the shoreline. Coast Guard units sailed along the wreckage. National Park Service crews marked danger zones, and stunned homeowners watched years of memories disappear beneath white-capped waves. Thankfully, all 5 homes were unoccupied. Families had already evacuated due to the rapid erosion. But the emotional devastation is real. A mother who lost her cottage said through tears, "We built this place in the 90s. Back then, the water was so far away. Now it's inside our living room." For residents of Buxton, the danger didn't arrive with sirens or a direct hurricane strike. It arrived in silence with every wave. At sunrise, homeowners stepped outside, expecting morning tides, but instead watched the ocean clawing its way through their streets. Decks splintered, pilings shook, and then the unthinkable one house leaned forward, cracked, and fell straight into the sea. And it didn't stop there. Throughout the day, 5 oceanfront homes collapsed roofs, crumpling entire living rooms, swallowed by surf. Families stood helpless as the Atlantic claimed everything they once sat down to dinner in. Some had moved out weeks earlier, knowing the foundations were weakening. Others packed through the night when emergency officials warned them their homes were now in the surf zone. Eyewitness videos captured from phones and security cameras show houses slowly tilting before crashing into the waves below. Furniture, lumber, and appliances drifted into the current, turning into dangerous debris fields stretching for miles. Cape Hatteras National Seashore Rangers rushed to block off beaches, warning that even a single step into the water could lead to injury, or worse. The crisis unfolded so quickly that many residents didn't have time to process it. One woman, fighting tears, looked at where her home once stood and said, "It was the oceanfront home of my dreams. Now, it's just the ocean." In Buxton, homeowners stood in disbelief, staring at the places where their houses once stood. Waves continued to crash over splintered beams and tangled wires, As families returned only to gather whatever remained, a wedding photo buried in the sand, a surfboard snapped in half a mailbox, half submerged in seawater. Many had already been fighting a losing battle for years, raising their homes on stilts, installing sand fences, and praying the shoreline would hold. But on Tuesday, the Atlantic made the decision for them. One resident whose home fell into the ocean mere hours after he evacuated could only watch from the safety of a dune as the structure tilted forward and broke apart. "We always knew this day might come," he said, his voice shaking. "But knowing doesn't make it hurt any less. For families like his, insurance is complicated and often doesn't cover losses caused by erosion. That means decades of investment can vanish in a single tide. Local businesses already strained by previous storms now face uncertain futures. Tourism drives the Outer Banks economy. When the beaches disappear, so does the lifeblood of the community. Officials warn that seasonal workers may not have jobs next summer if rebuilding fails to keep pace. Schools are closed in several neighborhoods, not because of wind damage, but because the only road in and out is underwater.
Look at that. Here comes a Jeep trucking through.
To understand why Buxton's coastline is disappearing so fast, scientists point to a dangerous equation: rising sea levels, stronger offshore storms, and a naturally shifting barrier island system. The Outer Banks were never designed by nature to be permanent. They are constantly moving sandbars reshaped by waves and wind. But today, that movement is accelerating beyond what coastal communities can handle. Sea level along the North Carolina coast has risen more than 10 inches over the past century, according to researchers with NOAA. That may seem small, but every inch allows storm surge and high-energy waves to reach farther inland. Combine that with climate-amplified hurricanes, like Melissa, whose enormous wind field pushes water toward shore, and erosion becomes unstoppable. Homes that once sat safely behind dunes now stand directly in the surf zone. Storms no longer need to make landfall to cause destruction. Melissa proved that from hundreds of miles away, its remote effects were enough to trigger catastrophic beach loss. Scientists warn that warm ocean temperatures are fueling more intense storms, and even when they stay offshore, they produce relentless wave action that grinds the shoreline down day after day. Beach nourishment projects bring temporary relief by pumping new sand onto eroded beaches. But experts say that sand washes away faster each year, especially in hotspots like Buxton. Without dramatic intervention, the rate of shoreline retreat could double again in coming decades. Communities are now debating hard choices: rebuild, relocate, or redesign the coast to live with a more powerful ocean. As one coastal engineer put it, "You can't fight the sea forever. At some point, the sea wins." As Melissa's distant waves devoured Buxton's shoreline, emergency officials scrambled to protect what remains. The closure of NC-12, the only highway linking the Outer Banks, instantly turned several villages into isolated pockets of uncertainty. State troopers, National Park Service crews, and NCDOT teams worked through rising tides to place barriers, remove debris, and monitor collapsing homes at the water's edge. Local leaders describe a community living storm to storm. For years, homeowners have fought to elevate houses, build dune fences, and truck in tons of sand. But Melissa shows that traditional defenses are failing. The Cape Hatteras National Seashore has intensified patrols to keep residents and tourists away from unstable structures littering the beach. Every high tide threatens to sweep new debris, including nails, septic tanks, and household chemicals, into the surf, creating public safety hazards that stretch for miles. Support lines are now forming from Raleigh to Washington, D.C. FEMA has been notified as assessments begin, and environmental engineers are mapping the coastline to identify zones of imminent collapse. The goal is simple: prevent more homes from falling and destroying the fragile ecosystem surrounding them. But the response is also emotional. Volunteers deliver meals, families sift through what little remains, and longtime residents watch their community shrink one storm at a time. Buxton's resilience has never been in doubt, but its limits are being tested. As a county official said through tears, "You don't just lose a house. You lose a place where life happened." The collapse of Buxton's homes is more than a headline. It is a warning. Scientists say the Outer Banks have always been temporary barrier islands built to move shifting with every tide and storm. But rising sea levels driven by a warming climate mean the ocean is no longer retreating. It is advancing farther each year, inch by inch, storm by storm. Homes once built 300 feet from the water now stand on eroding sand cliffs. What used to be a once-in-a-decade disaster now happens multiple times a year. Melissa didn't even make landfall here, and yet 5 houses collapsed in one day. Residents now face painful questions. Do we rebuild again? Do we elevate homes higher? Or do we retreat from a coastline that no longer stays still? Coastal engineers argue that beach nourishment dumping sand to rebuild lost shoreline can buy time, but not forever. And as storms intensify, the price of defending every mile of beachfront becomes astronomical. In the shadow of Hurricane Melissa, the emotional toll is the hardest to measure. Memories are lost to the waves. Generations of effort disappear overnight, and every cracked foundation reminds families that the next storm could take even more. This moment forces a truth nature writes the final map. And along the Outer Banks, that map is being redrawn faster than anyone ever imagined. From Jamaica to Cuba, and now the United States coastline. Hurricane Melissa's footprint stretches far beyond its center of rotation. It didn't have to make landfall in North Carolina to tear down homes, close highways, and reshape lives. One storm thousands of miles wide, proving that no place near the water is truly out of reach. The Outer Banks stand today between what once was and what lies ahead. As waves keep chewing away the land, the future of communities like Buxton hangs in the balance. Will these islands endure the next decade? Or will the Atlantic rewrite history one house at a time? But even in the debris, hope rises. Neighbors pull each other from floodwaters. Volunteers salvage what the sea tried to claim. Families vow to rebuild stronger, smarter, and more resilient. Because this coastline is more than sand, it's home. As we continue tracking Hurricane Melissa and its ripple effects across the Atlantic, remember this: climate is changing. Storms are growing. What we do next will decide how the story ends. Thank you for watching. Like, share, and subscribe to stay informed and support awareness. Together, we can protect our coasts before the ocean comes knocking again.